Chapter 28 of Workers Together. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Workers Together, or an Endless Chain, by Pansy. Chapter 28. Finding Out. What there was in this last suggestion to add to Robert Parks's annoyance he could hardly have told, unless it lay in the fact that Mr. Hastings was no friend of his, and had been his rival in the store on several occasions. If Mr. Hastings should hear of his refusal and the manner of it, it would afford him material for amusement. Greatly vexed with himself, and unaccountably irritated with the gentleman who had apparently tried to be so courteous, he moved on as rapidly as possible, his opportunity for witnessing allegiance to his new master having passed, and only this accomplished. The young man looked after him with a half-amused, half-bewildered expression, and said to himself, "What has happened to the fellow? I used to think he was genial and gentlemanly in the extreme." "Pluck," said Robert Parks, recalling Joy Saunders's word, which had, perhaps, made the more impression because she rarely used words of its class. "She wouldn't have thought I was showing much. Fact is, I don't suppose I am ready for that den of lions yet. But what was I to say? This is no place for an argument. If it had been, I don't know how to argue the question. I certainly don't believe I shall continue to go to the theater. I don't believe a Christian has any business there. Yet I haven't a single reason why that is expressible. Lovely education, that. What have I been sneering at in others, I wonder? I wish I had asked some of the boys whom I have heard make merry over the sins of others their reasons for thinking they were sins. It seems that I haven't even been sincere with my sneers, for now I don't know what they were about. I'll look into this thing. Dr. Everett and men of his stamp have reasons for their opinions, and know how to give them. I'll find out." So I think, after all, that Satan outwitted himself that morning. When an intelligent and right-intentioned young man resolves to find out any question, he is quite apt to succeed. At the corner he encountered Hester Mason. Her route for a time lay in his direction. He was not averse to joining her. She might belong to the class of people whom he meant gradually to drop, but in the meantime she was very bright and pleasant, and looked well in her new suit. It had been carefully selected with an eye to harmony, and the effect was good. Busy with the topic that had been suggested to him, the young man gave voice to his thoughts by a question. "You are the very one to ask. I want to know why you lavish so much ridicule on your friend Miss Mason when she attends a theater. What line of reasoning proves to you that she has no business there?" Hester bestowed a half-amused, half-curious, and wholly searching glance on the questioner before she spoke. "Are you trying already to hunt up an excuse for going to the theater tonight?" How quick-witted she was! Should he be amused or vexed? "No," he said. "I am trying to put into words some good reasons why I don't intend to go." "I am glad of it. I sort of want to believe in you, Rob, and if you were ready for a theater tonight, I know I should think you a humbug and nothing else." "That is just the point. Why would I be? What reason have you for saying so and thinking so? There must be reasons, you see, and you must know them, else you're a humbug." Hester laughed. This was bringing her to bay in a manner in which she was unaccustomed. She looked a trifle puzzled. "You ought not to expect me to argue," she said. "I am not a Christian. It is as much as I can do to sneer at those who pretend to be." "But I say you have no right to sneer unless you know good reasons why theater-goers are inconsistent." "Well, I do. I can think of a dozen. Whether I can tell them off or not is another question. If what you said in meeting last night is true, then you ought to be so much interested in other things that you would have no time to spend at the theater. That's one reason." "It isn't a good one. That is, it may be very good for me, because I understand what you mean, and just now, at least, I feel that I have neither time nor inclination. But it would not do to advance as a general argument. It reaches too far. For instance, I might take a walk with you, or a ride, which would take as much time, and have as little Christian work about it, as to go to the theater. Yet you would think it all right to take a ride with me, and would sneer at me for inviting you to the theater." Hester laughed. "It is too funny for you to make me argue on that side of the question," she said gaily. "I tell you I belong to the other. However, I can do it. You might possibly take a ride out in the country to rest your body and mine, I'm sure mine needs resting, and you might be able to get home at a respectable hour instead of being so late that you would feel like a sleepy idiot all the next day. That is the way I feel when I go to the theater. And you might, mind, I don't say you would, but then it is just possible that you might, say something improving to me while we rode along, something that would be a help to me afterwards. Isn't your imagination equal to such a stretch as that? I only used your name and mine for illustration, because you did, you know." She was certainly very quick-witted. Robert could not wish helping that he could say something to help her. "Yes," he said thoughtfully, "there is truth in that. The theater is not specially restful to one who has been at work all day. But, after all, how does that prove that Miss Mason's occasional attendance is inconsistent?" "Seems to me you are very anxious about Miss Mason. I don't care whether she is inconsistent or not. But I know she can't make me believe that her religion is worth much if she has to brace it up by theater going. Rob, do you remember that play last winter that made fun of a young fellow who was a Christian and was trying to do right? It just made him appear like a fool. Do you suppose if some of the boys in the Sunday school had heard it, they would have been more anxious to try to live up to their principles? Can't you think of 2 or 3 weak mortals, we won't say you and me this time, because we are both proof against all sorts of temptation, but don't you know some who would have been hindered by that very thing?" Very gravely Robert admitted that he did. "Well, then," triumphantly, "what right has a church member to go to such a place? More than that, how many times did that creature swear in the 3rd scene that same night? I shouldn't think that a church member would like to go for amusement where that sort of thing was going on. Why, I could get up a whole sermon on this question. I believe I'd like to do it. I'll tell you something, it makes such a splendid illustration. One day Miss Mason took it into her head to give me some advice. She did it in a really nice way, said she was my Sabbath school teacher, and took an interest in me and all that trash, you know. It isn't true, not a word of it, but she thinks it is, and so I respect her for it a little. Well, she said I talked too loud on the street. It made her blush sometimes to hear my voice. That people noticed it, and it wasn't the thing for a girl to do. Wasn't considered respectable, you know. I didn't get mad at her, because I honestly think she wanted to help me a little, and she wanted to help herself, too. She did not like to have me speak to her so loud when I met her. I told her I was much obliged, and that I would try to remember it the next time I saw her. And then I said I would appreciate her feelings, for when she and I were at the play the other night, some of the scenes were so coarse, and, in short, so far from being what I call respectable, that it made me blush like a peony. You ought to have seen her cheeks then. Peonies were nothing to them. She hasn't said a word to me about loud talking since, and I don't believe she ever will. But then I don't bear her any ill will. In fact, I'm glad she told me. I've noticed since that I talked louder than other people, on the street and in the cars, and I've about stopped it. I feel as ladylike again. But I'll tell you one person whom I hope never to see at a theater, and that is little Joy Saunders. I would as soon see a white lily shut up in a coal bin." There was the most curious mixture of daring fun and intense earnestness about this girl. Robert did not know whether to laugh or be shocked and startled. The reference to Joy opened his mouth. "I don't suppose you will ever see her," he said quickly. "As you say, the two do not match. However, there are theaters and theaters, you know. Some are far less objectionable than others." "Of course, and there are gamblers and gamblers, I suppose, and loafers and loafers. In fact, there are degrees of everything, of refinement, for instance, and I suppose I am 6th rate or so myself. I ought not to be expected to be more than that, considering my opportunities. But last night after you left me, I went to as fine a theater as there is, I suppose, and I, with my sixth rate, had to blush 2 or 3 times. If I had been first class myself, what would have become of me? That is why I say I don't see how the first class people can like the position." Robert winced visibly. "Don't talk so," he said earnestly. "Why should you speak of yourself as if you were not equal to any?" "Because I'm not." She was serious now, and fierce. "Don't you suppose I know that even you consider it condescension to have anything to do with me? You believe you have stepped down out of your sphere, and you are thinking now, among other new leaves that you mean to turn over, of cutting me, and getting into respectable society." "I am not," he said hotly, and it flashed over him just then, rather took hold of him as a conviction, that if such had been his intention it should be so no more. "I consider you my friend. I believe you capable of being much more than you are. I want to help you in any way that I can. I want you to come to Christ and be saved. He can lift you to any place in which he chooses to have you. I believe he has given you brains to use for him. You have helped me this morning. You have made me see things that I did not see before. I am in earnest, and I want to be." All the flash and the fire had gone out of her face, and also out of her voice. "My father is a miserable drunkard." She spoke the words low, so low that he could hardly catch them, her lip quivering the while. "That is your misfortune," he said quickly, "not your blame. You have had a great many misfortunes, I know. You have not had many advantages, for instance, and I have not helped you since I knew you. I have not thought of doing so, but now I want to. I would like to be your friend, and I would like to see you take a stand for Christ. I am sure he has work for you to do, Hester. Perhaps it may be to save your father. Such things have been." He never forgot the look in her eyes as she turned them toward him shining with tears. They had reached the corner where their paths separated. "Whatever I may be," she said, still speaking low, "I believe in you. I was not sure that I did. Now I am. Thank you. I shall think better of the world all day because of this. Good-bye." Chapter 29.